Okay, this video is called What Are the Best Stoicism Quotes? So Socrates is sort of considered the father of Stoicism, but Stoicism was really popularized by the Romans. It makes a person more resilient. I think it's good. I think it goes well with Christianity. In Stoicism, you focus on what you can control, what is within your own power, your thoughts, your emotions, how you're going to respond to something. And you try to ignore things that are beyond your control. A little bit like the Serenity Prayer. Okay, Stoicism is also, it's a form of minimalism. So it's a little bit, Spartan-like. It's very rational and objective. Stoicism is helpful to people at all levels. As Michael Sugru said, it works for the emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius, for aristocrats like Seneca of Rome, and even for slaves like Epictetus. Those are three of the most famous Stoics. Aurelius was one of the last of the great emperors. He wore a beard which sort of aligned him with the Greek philosophers like Aristotle, for example, rather than the clean-shaven, Caesars, Julius and Augustus Caesar. My favorite quote of all Stoicism, it comes from Marcus Aurelius. He said, "A man should be like a cliff against which the waves break, but the cliff stands firm." So what that means to me is, all day long you have to deal with stuff which is quite often rough, difficult, often unpleasant, and you just deal with it. And most of it's trivial, busy work, but you have to stand your ground and be firm about it. For example, I got the idea for this, how this works, when I was shadowing emergency room doctors. The best emergency room doctors were very polite and nice, but somewhat emotionless. They would deal with these complex patient problems and go from one room to the next and never really seem emotionally phased. And a lot of times the stories were pretty sad. But I noticed the attending didn't budge. It was this guy, he was a cool guy, this one doctor I got trained with. He was sort of a former special forces guy. And man, he was a tough guy, and I really liked hanging around with him. Luckily, my dad introduced me to him, and I hung around with him for about a week or so is all the time I had with him. But that was good for me. Anyways, all right, now Marcus Aurelius continues. So anyway, well, actually, let me continue a little more with that. So what that means is you don't internalize things. First of all, you can't get emotional, because if you're emotional, you can't function well when you have to go to the next room and deal with something else complex. And secondarily, you don't personalize or internalize things. Like, let's say I deal with somebody who's rude or nasty or unreasonable. I don't say to myself, "Oh, did I behave wrong?" I say to myself, "That person's a stupid idiot, cognitively impaired, might have serious brain disease, or just be a drug addict, jerk, alcoholic, moron." I don't take it on myself. Like when I first started out in medicine, I would be like, "Oh gosh, did I say the wrong thing? Did I do the wrong thing?" No, I don't blame myself. I say, like also the line from the House of God book by Sam Michel. I say, "The patient's the one with the disease. I'm the same straightforward person every day." Okay, so I don't get bothered by people who are rude or nasty, because I just say it's because they're a stupid jerk. It's not my fault. So that's good, because I have to deal with a lot of stuff, and I can't be getting emotionally distracted by nonsense. Okay, Marcus Aurelius continues. "A man's true delight is to do the things he was made for." Okay, there's a lot of people who agree with that. Like Watson and Crick, Watson would say, a horse is happy when it does what it's designed for. A horse is happy when it runs. And I think there's truth that a man is happy when he does what he feels he has a talent for, an interest for. Okay, decide to be extraordinary. Do what you need to do now. Very little is needed to live a happy life. Look beneath the surface. Do not let the multiple qualities of a thing nor its value escape you. The true worth of a man is to be measured by the objects he pursues. So that's kind of what was cool about Marcus Aurelius, is that he was an intelligent guy who did the best he could for Rome, and he didn't, get carried away by all his wealth. There were other, emperors who used all their wealth and power to want things that would be quite unreasonable. Some of them wanted a different concubine every day, for example. Caligula ran his horse to be, in his Senate cabinet. Okay, so a lot of unreasonable things happened by those emperors of ancient Rome. Okay, Aurelius continues. "Most of what we say and do is not necessary, and the omission would save us both the time and the trouble. At every step, a man should ask himself, is this one another of these things that are superfluous? The obstacle to action can advance action. What stands in the way is the way." Now, I like that one, because lots of times, as an individual, the odds are against you, and there's quite often some person or something just really blocking you. And that reminds me of a quote. another quote. It's called "Resources are the enemy of creativity." And what I get from that is sometimes the more resources you have, the more difficult it is to be creative. And by that I mean if you look at great artistic creations that have been made, they've often been made at times of terrible poverty and suffering and overwhelming amounts of work. Like the guy who wrote, Robert Pirsig, when he wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Madness, he was maintenance. He was working full time. He would get up at 2, he'd go to bed early, get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and start writing. And it was really heroic. Mozart, when he was composing a lot of his best work, it was at a time when he was broke, his children were real sick, very difficult times. And he just kept pushing himself and working, so I admire that a lot. Here's another aristocrat, stoic, Seneca. He had a tough life as well. He says, "It is a rough road that leads to heights of greatness," because you got to just keep pushing yourself no matter what else is going on. And that's why I think all those cross-country runners are so smart, because the same determination that gets you to push yourself when you're running a 3-mile race or something similar is what gets you to push yourself when you're trying to overcome intellectual obstacles. That, by the way, is the statue of Marcus Aurelius there. The equestrian statue of him. Okay, Epictetus was a slave in ancient Rome. He was really a Greek Stoic philosopher, and he wrote the book The Art of Living. Marcus Aurelius had written a book called his Meditations, okay? Okay, so here's what Epictetus says. "Inferior people blame others for their problems," like saying, "Everybody in my family's fat is genetic." Ordinary people blame themselves, like saying, "I tried to lose weight, but I don't have the willpower." But a superior person just solves problems. They look around and say, "Gee, a lot of other people succeeded in losing weight. I will study how they do it." Okay, Epictetus continues. He says, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." That's part of it too, like with nutrition and diet. People think they already know nutrition, so they're not willing to listen to new information. Okay, Epictetus continues. "In theory, it is easy to convince an ignorant person, but in practice, in actual life, men not only object to offer themselves to be convinced, but they hate the man who has convinced them. Keep company only with people who will uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best. If you wish to be a writer, then write." That's also true. If you want to do something, you got to start. Even though the odds are against you, you don't have all the resources you want, you just get going on. Oh, getting back to that quote from Inside the Score, the YouTube channel, it was that resources are the enemy of creativity. A lot of times you want to minimize resources. The time that I was most efficient at cranking out books was when I totally put myself into isolation mode. No social media, no phone calls, go to bed early, wake up early every day, and just crank on the books. And I cranked out books very fast at that time. And I didn't check the internet. I did almost everything just from my old papers and resources I already had. And that surprisingly really helped me to get stuff done fast. Okay, now here's Epictetus continuing. He says, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. You can't make progress facing both ways." He also says, if somebody handed over your body to a passerby, you would be annoyed. So aren't you ashamed that you allow your mind to be handed over to anyone, that you allow yourself to become upset and confused if someone insults you? You become what you give your attention to. And that's sort of like the classic Earl Nightingale quote. You become what you think about. Yeah. When we blather about trivial things, we ourselves become trivial, for our attention gets taken up with trivialities. Every difficulty in life presents us with an opportunity to turn inward and to invoke our own submerged inner resources. The trials we endure and can and should introduce us to our own strengths. Dig deeply. You possess strengths you might not realize you have. Find the right one and use it. So yeah, whenever you have a problem, a lot of times what you need to do is try to talk to people who got experience with it, who might be able to help you. Read as much as you can about it. Watch videos if you can about it. And quite often, you'll be amazed at how rapidly you can progress. I've been in situations like that plenty of times, and that has really been helpful. Okay, now we're under the quotes by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. I'm actually going to bounce back and forth a little bit between the Greeks and the Romans and some of the philosophers from the 1700s and the 1800s. Goethe's from both of those centuries. First, build a proper goal. The proper goal will make it easy, almost automatic, to build a proper you. That's like one of the key things. Figure out what your goals are. If you figure out what your goals are, then you can start planning an approach to achieve them. Most people never make up their mind what they want to do, and you can't achieve anything great unless you make a decision that you want to do it. Okay, Gerta continues. The important thing in life is to have a great aim and the determination to attain it. The person born with a talent they are meant to use will find their greatest happiness in using it. The highest happiness of a man is to have probed that which is knowable. Okay, yeah, and that's another thing too. Like, I really like reading these scientific papers because I see all this great information that these PhDs figured out, but they can't connect the dots. They can't put it all together. So I see that's sort of like one of my major purposes in life, and it makes me happy to do that. That's why I'm happy to crank and read all day long. And like my kid saw me, this has happened to me before, and I've had, my kid's not the only one who said this to me. They goes, Dad, why are you so happy? Your life sucks. All you do is work all the time, and then when you're home, you're always studying and writing books or giving your lectures. Why don't you do something fun? Why don't you go to the beach with Mom? Why don't you? And I'm like, you know what? Like, I really want to go to the beach all day, sit in a car commuting, rub sunscreen crap on myself. No way. I can stand out in the backyard for 30 minutes. Where I belong is going through these journal articles and books and figuring things out. That's sort of what I feel like is the most valuable thing I can do with my time at this time in my life. I'm 60 years old, okay? So anyways, everybody has for themselves, knows what's best for themselves. Okay, Ralph Waldo Emerson, to be great is to be misunderstood. Where that comes from is whenever you're doing something, top notch really, what ends up happening is people around you think you're being a weirdo, okay? Like my kid. My mother used to say the same to me when I was in medical school. Why do you study so much? You're being a nerd. That's not normal. No, I read all the biographies, guys who did great academic achievements, and that's what they did. They worked and studied all the time. That's what you have to do if you're going to try to achieve, something really advanced in academics. That's just, the price you have to pay to do that. And I like Arthur Schopenhauer's quote. He said, "A happy life is impossible. The highest a man can achieve is a heroic life. The best source of happiness comes from who the man is." And so what that means to me is basically you can't do that many things. You can only really put your energy into 1, 2, at the most 3 things. So if you put your energy into, 1, do your job so you can pay your bills. Number 2, do whatever task it is you want to do that you think is most valuable. And number 3, try to be good to your family. And that's about all a man could do. You really can't be great at that many things. You don't have time. I'm pissed off because I don't have more time to study and read and write books and make videos. I'm working full time and I just crank out what I can. And so I don't have time for frivolous, silly nonsense. Rollo May, human freedom involves our capacity to pause between the stimulus and the response, and in that pause to choose the one response towards which we want to throw our weight. Okay, so basically, yeah, learning to pause. When you're young, young guys, they tend to overreact to things. And it's good to kind of slow down, take your time, think about it, make a decision, then go with that. And that actually takes a lot of self-control to do rather than just impulsively respond. Okay, now Will Durant, the great historian. He says, there is something noble and honorable about Greek Stoicism. Greek Stoicism acknowledges the necessity for faith in God. Stoicism leads not away from religion. Stoicism leads towards religion. And I would agree with that. Stoicism goes perfectly with Christianity. To be a Christian Stoic, that's a strong thing to be for the individual. So always remember, Christianity is a religion of poor people, okay? It's not the religion of rich people. It's a religion of poor people. And it sort of adds resilience and hope and joy to their life. Will Durant continues, all Western civilization is dying. Western civilization is dying because it has lost the religious basis of its moral code. We are living in a post-Christian era. Civilizations begin with religion and stoicism. They end with unbelief and the undisciplined pursuit of individual pleasure. A civilization is born stoic and it dies Epicurean. Okay, and that very much goes like with the paintings of Thomas Cole, The Course of Civilization. And that goes with Vico's theory. Vico had this theory of that's how a civilization is. The men are strong and upright and hardworking, and they build a civilization, and they have a religion, a shared moral code, and everything is great, and they become prosperous and live well. and then they start becoming degenerate, and then they start having philosophers who mock the religion and mock the traditions, and eventually the people become dissolute and immoral, and the society falls apart, and it gets conquered by another country that's, more basic and strong and tough and religious and works together. Okay, Alexander Solzhenitsyn from Russia. He wrote, "Truth, Christianity, and Stoicism are good for people. Own only what you can carry with you, no languages." Okay, yeah, he's written and said a lot of great stuff. Also, I noticed there's something almost stoic about the introduction to objectivist philosophy of Ayn Rand. And it starts out very stoic and rational and objective. Stoicism is kind of rational, objective, non-emotional. But one of the things I love about Ayn Rand is, man, she majored in history in college. And so she knows a lot of history, and she did her share of reading. She read the philosophers. She read the great literature authors, and so she knows what she's talking about. Her best book is The Romantic Manifesto, where she summarizes the art of the 1800s and how magnificent it was. And we've sort of fallen to a lower level in the 1900s, and even further worse and lower in the 2000s. Okay, there was another writer, philosopher from England, Dalrymple, and he said sort of the modern Britons are barbarians, walking through the ruins of a civilization which is far superior to theirs. Okay, a little bit of ancient Greeks now on Stoicism, like the so-called founder of Stoicism, indirectly, just his style, sort of rational, objective, Socrates. He said, "The proper naming of things is the beginning of wisdom. Strong minds talk about ideas. Average minds discuss events. Weak minds discuss people." Doesn't that sound familiar? When the debate is lost, slander becomes a tool of the loser. Okay, and now we have Aristotle. And Aristotle says, knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, of course, the Bible in Proverbs says, fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, knowing yourself is valuable, that you know yourself when you get an emotion, and instead of responding suddenly, you say, "Oh, I always feel that way when this thing happens, therefore the wiser thing is such and such." Okay, so anyways, Aristotle continues, "The high-minded man must care more for truth than for what other people think. The first step to having a useful conversation is to remove emotions." That's true. "Where your talents and the needs of the world cross, there lies your vocation." Yep. So a lot of us have talents. The hard part is figuring out how to make those merge with what the world needs or what the world appreciates. Fyodor Dostoevsky, "The darker the night, the brighter the stars." Miyamoto Musashi. My wrestling coach, Dave Schultz, used to like to read Musashi. He said, "Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. There is more than one path to the top of the mountain." Okay, don't give up. Try another way. Bruce Lee, "Be formless, be shapeless, be like water." Yeah, don't let people sort of control how you think. You think your own way. Okay, Thomas Edison, "Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is to always try one more time." I think that's why it's been said too, a lot of times the most successful people are the ones who have that sense of destiny, sense of mission. This is what they were born to do, because they're going to be more tenacious and bounce back more. Everybody's got setbacks, disappointments, and failures on the path to success. Here's a good quote by Amelia Earhart, "The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity." Yeah, you got to really spend time figuring out, what do I want to do? Because once you figured it out, then you can get alignment between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind, and you can throw all your energy into achieving your goals. Brian Tracy is also good for coaching about goals. Stoicism is good because Stoicism basically says, be simple. Just focus on the few things that matter and don't worry about anything else, because that gives you a lot of energy. Goethe used to say that too. Focus on concentrating your powers, focusing your energy and skills on the few things you want to achieve. Now here's some good quotes by Albert Camus, the French writer from the 1900s. He said, "Art advances between two chasms, which are frivolity and propaganda. On the ridge, where the great artist moves forward, every step is an adventure, an extreme risk. It is in that risk, however, and only there, lies the freedom in art." Okay, so what that means to me is basically, if you want to do good creative work, you have to accept the fact there's always going to be tension. The people are going to get pissed off at you for telling the truth. Some people are going to be jealous at you for going farther with the topic than they've gone. And when you tell the truth, and especially if the truth is controversial, people are going to hate you. They're going to badmouth you. Look at medicine. If you discover something that takes money away from big pharma, they might try to get you fired from your job. They retract your publication from the journals. So it's paradoxical, but it's true. The better the work, the harder it is to get it published, and the more likely the publication will be retracted from the journals. Okay. So it's weird. Medicine's not like sports. If you're a great athlete, when you're Michael Jordan in sports, man, you get a reward, most valuable player award. When you do great work in the sciences and in medicine, you'll often get attacked and censored and hassled. Big Pharma does not want those patients getting better, and any doctor that tries to help the patient get better with a chronic disease is going to run into major obstacles. It's not easy. You have to kind of almost get outside the system, and that's what was so great about Kempner, and that's, I think, the way to do it. And there's a couple, obviously great doctors doing that now, but I think that's what has to happen. But they're probably going to have to accept making a lot less money, unfortunately, than is made in conventional medicine. It's just the way it is. Okay, Albert Camus continues. Every authentic work of art is a gift offered to the future. Yeah, when you do great work, it's probably not going to get reimbursed, sadly. It's tough to get reimbursed for great work. Albert Camus continues. Always go too far, because that's where you will find the truth. And that other quote, every authentic work of art is a gift offered to the future. That's very much like what, Schopenhauer had said as well. You're almost like a man alone on a desert island, just creating some monument that some future civilization will see, because your own contemporaries probably aren't aware of it, or you're lucky if they're interested in it. And I think a lot of young doctors, they really want to know the truth. They really want to know how to help the patients. It just isn't taught to them in their conventional training, schooling, or books. And by the time they get done with all their conventional training, they're exhausted. They have to make partner. Their hospital or clinic is exploiting them for every last ounce of work to generate billing codes it can get out of them. And they really have the energy gone. They're in their mid-30s or something by the time they have a kid, maybe 40 by the time they have a kid, and the kid's old enough that they can get some sleep. So that's why you don't see more discoveries coming out of medicine. That's a big part of it. Okay, Albert Camus continues. When you have once seen the glow of happiness on the face of a beloved person, you know that a man can have no vocation but to awaken that light on the faces surrounding him. In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me lay an invincible summer, and that makes me happy. So that's some pretty good stuff coming out of Camus. He was a little bit of that existentialist school, but I still like him. He did some good things. He did a little bit of BS, but he did a lot of good stuff too. And I like him so much better than Sartre. Sartre is a jerk. The more you learn about Sartre, you won't like him anymore. Sartre is a scumbag. He's kind of like, the French version of Picasso for his field. He's a scumbag. Okay, Stoicism is a little bit like cognitive behavioral therapy. And that was largely developed by Aaron Beck and David Burns, which is a form of positive relativism, trying to reframe the situation, always trying to reframe it in a more positive way. And some of that too, it's again like the Serenity Prayer. It's like basically saying, try to keep an attitude of gratitude. Yes, you've got problems, but it could be much worse. Okay, and now I'll get to this in some contemporary examples. I heard some different athletes say things like, if it is to be, it is up to me. Yeah, as you get a little older, you kind of realize no one really cares about you except your family, if you're lucky. And you have to sort of say, okay, this is my life, this is my time, this is what I want to achieve. How can I do it? Everything must come from me. No one cares. No one cares if I succeed or fail. So I have to generate the energy, and I have to figure out a useful strategy to achieve my goals. And so when you kind of accept it's up to yourself, you don't go looking for help. You just figure out how can you do it yourself. That's a good thing. I mean, obviously, it's great to have help. Everybody benefits from getting help and coaching and all these other things. It's just sadly, quite often, it's not going to come from anyone except yourself. Okay, Stoicism, like things my wrestling coach said to me. These are just a few of the things they said to me that I remember. The night is darkest before the dawn. Your injury is going to heal. I was a little frustrated, especially my senior year of high school, when it took a long time for my injury to heal. And they're always going to say, stop whining. And that's also why I think boys really need fathers, because their mothers love them. They need that unconditional love. But kids in divorced families often end up messed up because they need that from a father. And my father used to piss me off, sort of like no matter what I did, he was always demanding more of me. But I also knew that it also motivated me. So in some ways it was good. These are like things my father would say, and I'm not saying it's my dad's original quote. It's not, but this is what my father would say to me. He'd say, "To whom much is given, much is expected," which meant, in our family context, do your work and stop your whining. My father would also say to me, if you want to become great, you got to do your work. And the way he would say it is, the price of greatness is responsibility. The price of greatness is responsibility. And what he meant by that is, do your work, train harder, study more, and stop whining. Just shut up. So he was pretty harsh on me in many situations, and I resented it growing up. But again, I think it was beneficial to me. The best thing my father ever did for me was be a role model. Every day I saw my father work all day long, and then at night read. Go for exercise, walk the dog, and then read. So that pretty much programmed me to work all day long, and then to exercise, and then to read, and listen to classical music or Irish music. It was just built into me. My mom used to listen to a lot of nice music too, a little bit different. She liked the waltzes of Strauss, for example. Okay, Stoicism in Medicine. This comes some of this from this book, The House of God by Sam Nishan, which is a great book. The patient is the one with the disease. That was helpful for a young doctor to read that, because young doctors are kind of a little bit emotional. They're always worried, did they do something wrong? No, the way you interact is fine. It's just one patient's a reasonable person, the next one's an alcoholic drug addict. You can't change that, okay? They can always hurt you more. What that means is that no matter how busy you are, it can always get busier. And a lot of times, crunch time happens right when it's time to go home. I'll be done, let's say I'm supposed to get done at 5 o'clock, and there'll be like, a stack of emergencies come in right at 4:30. And, I might not get done until 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So, tough beans, pal. It could be worse. So, you just have to crank through it. And having an attitude of gratitude helps you. Some of the things like my senior resident said when I was in training, like through my surgical internship, for example, like whenever I did something stupid, or said something stupid, they would say, "Where did you go to medical school?" I wouldn't wipe my ass with that diploma. And I actually thought they were funny. I liked the way they would joke, but that would be a typical comment. Another one said to me one time, and this was very good advice: always finish all your work, every bit of it. Never dump work on other people. And those are good attitudes to have in medicine. I don't care what part of medicine you go into, there's usually going to be tons and tons of work to do. And doctors tend to all be hard workers, not necessarily bright, but hard workers. So anyways, I think these Stoicism principles are helpful. This idea of you're just going to have to get tough and crank out the work, and so what if you have to be there all day? No one cares about you. It's just your job to get it done. And I think that builds duty, resilience, and over time you just get stronger and more able to do it. So anyways, hope that was helpful.